So here the basic piece of evidence that you need to have in mind is that the US as a country has been playing yo-yo with its reach over the past century. So as you see, the US and the UK, to a large extent, were having a quasi-confiscatory tax rate at the very top. So these were on very top income levels, typically above what today $1 million in income. The top rate, if you take the average for the US between 1932 and 1980, the average was 82%. Okay, and that was for the federal income tax. Sometimes it was up to 91 under Roosevelt, and sometimes it was 70, but on average it was 82%. Now in Europe, you've never had such large tax rate. It's interesting, except in Germany, when you had the 90% here, it was in fact because this was set by the Americans. This was the Allied Control Council, and when Germany took back its economic sovereignty in 1949, they immediately cut tremendously the top tax rate because they thought this is a crazy US level, we should never have this. So, Europe, in terms of top income taxation, has been more stable in a way. Tax history is always a chaotic history because, of course, it has to be like that. But relatively to the really chaotic change that US and UK have gone through the Reagan and Thatcher revolution, this is very, very stable. Now, our theory, is simply that this has completely changed the name of the game at the top end of the pay setting process, which is, at that time, if you want to get paid 1 million more, 80%, 90% is going to go directly to the treasury. So it's really hard to convince your subordinates and everyone around you, your shareholders, etc., that it's worth it. And even yourself, you are not so convinced because when it's 30% or 40%, it's a completely different game. And I think this has really completely changed the name of the game. Or, at least, the evidence is that this seems to have contributed in those countries and not in others to the huge rise in top pay. Okay? So, I think, I don't want to give too much of a Europe-centric interpretation of US national history with respect to inequality, but I think a lot of this change in US attitude towards inequality have also to do with the way the US model perceives itself as compared to Europe. I think, in the 70s, 80s, the Reagan Revolution was partly motivated by the feeling that there was catching up by not only by Japan, Germany, but also France, Italy. Everybody was catching up with the UK also. There was a kind of feeling, and to a large extent, the catching up process was just a natural catching up process following the war. But I think this created a lot of stress in this country, and at least this is the line that Reagan very much exploited to sort of promote return to a supposedly government-free or tax-free 19th century capitalist US model. And it's interesting to see that in the 1920s, when very steeply progressive taxation was introduced in the US, the reference to Europe is also very important, but completely in the other direction, which was that at that time Europe was seen as high inequality continent, which we didn't want to look at. And I was particularly impressed by the discourse of Irving Fisher, who was the president of the American Economic Association, and he gave his big speech in 1919 at the AEA meeting, where he said, okay, my fellow economists, I have to tell you the biggest problem that the US economy is having right now is the excessive concentration of wealth. The wealth is getting so concentrating, we are getting almost as unequal as Europe. This is amazing. We cannot continue like this because the spirit of equal opportunity in America could not go on with such an excessive concentration of wealth and excessive concentration of power that will go with it. And I think this seems to have played a role in the invention of steeply progressive taxation that took place in America in the interwar period. Now, this seems completely crazy to us viewed from today, where the fear, if any, is the opposite. The fear is not to look like Soviet Europe, because in the meantime, all the aristocratic Europe has become almost the Soviet Union, as viewed from the US. So, I don't want to make too much of this sort of psychological interpretation, but I think this, inequality is a lot about national identity, and the politics of inequality have a lot to do with how each country wants to perceive, tries to perceive its own national model as being fair, as being right, and of course we compare yourself to other countries, and I think it's an important part of the story. Just to sum up, the question is, does it work in terms of growth? You can see that this certainly works in terms of equality. So here you have the change in top 1% share as compared to the change in top tax rate. So you can see the US, UK have reduced a lot their top tax rate, and this has led to a large increase in equality, or at least you have a clear relationship. Now in terms of growth performance, this is much less clear, in the sense that there is not more growth in the US or the UK than in Germany or Denmark. The growth performance over the past 30 years per capita is pretty much the same everywhere. So in other words, it doesn't really seem to be worth it to have such a large rise in inequality, because the total growth rate, it's not bigger. So if the top 10% is taking a rising share, it means the bottom 90% are losing. So that doesn't seem, there seems to be evidence that this is mostly rent extraction, but there's not so much extra productivity. In Germany, there's been no rise in equality, and apparently they managed to produce cars and sell cars. So it's not clear in terms of growth that productivity growth. Inequality, it's a little bit like, Robert Solow was trying to find computers in the growth statistics, and he couldn't find them. And if you try to find the rising inequality in the US in the productivity growth statistics, the boost in productivity growth and innovation that should come from very dynamic and vibrant top 1%, you just don't see it in the growth statistics. And so